Hola, buenas tardes. Sí, ya te puedo escuchar porque no oía nada. Gracias, Eduardo.
Abajo hay un button, le dice interpretación.
Hola, buenas tardes. Sí, ya te puedo escuchar porque no oía nada.
Bueno, Araceli, buenas tardes.
Abajo hay un button, le dice interpretación.
We are now live streaming.
Hola, buenas tardes.
Okay, is she all set or no? I don't want to start until she can hear the translator.
Bueno, Araceli, ¿ahora puede escuchar? ¿Puede oír?
Sí, ya puedo escuchar bien, gracias.
¿En español o en inglés? ¿Cómo quiere?
Sí, me fui a idioma y escogí español.
Ok, abajo ha escogido español. Hay un button que dice interpretación. ¿Puede escoger español o inglés?
Sí, ya escogí español.
Oh, okay. So team, I'm not familiar with the way this exactly works on Zoom. She said that she chose Spanish.
Yeah.
She can still speak. So even though she chose Spanish, I think she can still speak, right? So she'll have to mute herself.
Sí, entonces, Araceli, durante esa reunión, el público no puede hablar, sino la directora Ford dice que es su turn. ¿Ok?
But just to confirm, Tiffany and Ed, she can hear the translation, correct?
I'm not seeing Ed.
Ed is checking.
Ok, Eduardo, ¿a quién voy a escuchar en español? ¿A ella o a ti?
A él.
¿A ti? Ok, sí te estoy escuchando ahorita lo que tú me estás diciendo.
So we can hear her, Ed.
Sí, entonces, sí, nomás lo prendí para contestarte, pero ya lo voy a mantener apagado, ¿ok?
Bueno.
She's going to turn it off.
Muchas gracias.
Okay.
Muchas gracias. Que tengan buena noche.
Okay, so is she all set, Ed? She's good? Okay, cool. Well, good evening, everyone. It's 5:04 on January 28th. We are here for an open session. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order now. We'll begin with our land acknowledgement read by our Vice Chair, Director Bauer.
Thank you, Chair Ford. The land acknowledgement, native land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the land on which we sit and which we call North Clackamas School District. It rests on the traditional and indigenous lands and village sites of the native peoples of Kalapuya, Chinook, Molalla, and Clackamas. We take this opportunity to offer gratitude for the ability to learn, work, and be a community on this land. We offer thanks to the original caretakers of this region. We recognize the historic policies of colonization, genocide, relocation, and assimilation that affected Indigenous and Native families, both past, present, and that will affect those in the future, and honor the resilience and revitalization of our Indigenous and Native communities. We pay our respects to the elders, both past and present, who have been the stewards of this land throughout the generations.
Thank you, Director Bauer. The next thing on our agenda is our community request. I'm going to go ahead and read a statement before we begin. Anyone wishing to speak before the board, either as an individual or as a member of a group, may do so by following the district's guidelines for public comment. These printed guidelines are available at each board meeting. Any individual desiring to speak will submit their name, address, and the group, if any, that is represented, and a speaker should give their name and the group, if any, that is represented, and should limit his or her presentation to 3 minutes. Time may be extended at the discretion of the board chair. Speakers may offer objective criticism of district operations and programs that are of a concern to them. The board is restricted from hearing and will not consider complaints regarding any individual district staff member or any person connected with the district. Before we begin, we have 6 total comments. When you're at 1 minute of your comment, 1 minute remaining in your 3 minutes, I will hold this up to let you know that you have 1 minute. When you reach your 3-minute mark, at my discretion, I may mute you. We do only have 20 minutes to do this. We love our community, but we have lots to do and lots to talk about. We want to make sure that we use our time wisely. In addition to that, all comments tonight are individuals' opinions. We've received several emails with all types of opinions for this specific subject of reopening. So please be aware of that as you're listening in the public. Okay, Cindy, are we ready to rock and roll with our first public comment?
Yes, first up is Jesse Dobson. Jesse, go ahead and unmute your mic and you may begin.
I would first like to address the intent of this statement. Our educators of color hope is to present and represent a view that is often oppressed implicitly or explicitly. We fully acknowledge that we do not have the power or privilege to decide when students return to their classrooms. Our intention is to analyze and apply the NCESD equity lens to ensure that all members of our North Clackamas community's voice is heard, especially the voices of our communities of color. The first question found on the decision-making framework asks, which systems of oppression might exist within this situation? Perhaps critical theory can be applied to illuminate both systemic oppression and the role white supremacy has had on the decision-making process, from how decision-making data was collected to whose voices were not included in interpreting that data. The sense of urgency, a characteristic of white supremacist culture in response to the desire to return to the status quo, is a privilege shared by a vocal minority, not by other members of the North Clackamas community whose narratives have been silenced through neglect and exclusion. The understanding that white dominant culture norms serve as a gatekeeper for access will allow us to examine another question from the equity lens decision-making mechanism. Whom does the decision affect both positively and negatively? The presence of NCEA Affinity Group here tonight is to provide a platform for our communities of color. Our Black, Indigenous, and other students of color will suffer most from returning to school prematurely. The majority of our K-1 students have only ever known virtual school. Disrupting the routines established by primary teachers will most definitely have unintended social emotional consequences. It is also worth noting that these students will lose consistency in seeing their loving teachers every day, and instructional time will be severely cut. There is also particular concern for the health of our students' families who are returning to multi-generational households and the influence historic barriers play in the prevention of our families of color's access to healthcare options. Lastly, I would like to address the question, are those being affected by the decision included in the process? One could question the methodology used to obtain the data to make this decision. The follow-up to the original survey sent home lacked adequate translation options, not to mention the assumption that every community member had access to email and/or reliable internet connection. This assumption that families have the same opportunity to provide their narrative is rooted in the canon that is white supremacy. Additionally, the nuances of the structure of the hybrid model were difficult to find and created major barriers for access for our families of color. The consequences of this decision are yet to be known. However, if the social emotional well-being of our students is at the heart of our decisions, then having students return to their classrooms should align with the district's equity stance and decision-making process. Thank you.
Next up, we have Julie Scarful. Julie, go ahead and unmute your mic. Thank you, Jesse.
Sorry, I was told I was going fourth, so thank you. Thank you very much for all your work and for working on the reopening plan. As much as I can, I understand that this is a very hard and complicated process. My comments are feedback, not criticism. I understand you guys have put hours and hours into this, and it's a heavy decision, and I don't envy it. However, as I see it, it is a very incomplete plan right now because it only allows for K-3 students to return to the classroom. Our 4th through 12th graders also need the option of going back in person to their classes. I'm actually confused as to why you're holding back 4th through 12th graders from getting the instruction and support that they need from school. When it comes to reopening, North Clackamas has said that it will be guided by equity and also valuing a high quality education and the academic progress of each child. Equity CDL is not equitable for most. It's predicated on all families having internet, speaking English, and having a stable home environment. This is not the case for many families. You know this, and I know this because I do crisis care for families, and I see how much they're hurting right now, and I see how their kids are not being educated right now because of the stress that they're under just personally. CDL leaves many kids in abusive homes, many kids hungry. It creates huge learning gaps for many historically underserved students. It will cause many to drop out of school. And these facts alone, experts tell us, these students will earn less over their lifetime and have a shortened lifespan. It leaves many children isolated, depressed, anxious, suicidal, and it leaves many home alone for hours on end, many leading extremely sedentary lifestyles, and it's caused spikes in eating disorders among children. It has robbed so many students of critical support in getting job training, college scholarships, and the necessary help applying for college. And as far as valuing a high quality education, there's data that shows CDL does not provide the education that most students need. Some, it works great, but for most it doesn't. And we know this by the number of kids who are failing classes and or not attending classes. It was very evident when my son got his report card in 4th grade, and it was generic because North Clackamas said they could not adequately assess his academic progress for the fall term because of CDL. He was very upset and disappointed because he had worked miserably under CDL for the entire term. I know that North Clackamas has looked at the data, and I know you're responsible for creating a reopening plan. I would just encourage you to create a reopening plan that's equitable for all students. 4th through 12th grade needs the option to be going back to school in person if that's what they need. I'm not saying fling the doors open and cut off CDL for all people, but give all of your students an option to have an education that is equitable for them and their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I don't see our next person on the list, so I'll go to the one after. Teresa Jaramillo. Teresa or Teresa?
Hi, my name is Teresa.
Go ahead, Teresa. You may begin.
Mi nombre es Teresa Jaramillo. Hablo español porque no quiero que mi mensaje sea malinterpretado para la comunidad latina. Soy madre y maestra en nuestro distrito escolar. Mis alumnos me conocen como maestra Jaramillo, pero hoy compartiré mis preocupaciones con ustedes como madre. Como madre, North Clackamas me pidió a través de una encuesta con muy poca información para decidir en qué modelo quería que estuviera mi hijo de 2º grado, si las escuelas volvieran a abrir. Tomé una decisión que debo admitir que no estaba informada, pero tomé la decisión que pensé que causaría menos interrupciones en la educación de mi hijo. El otro día mi hijo estaba tan feliz y emocionado porque finalmente hizo un amigo. Esa fue una de las razones por la que elegí mantenerlo en el modelo CDL. Pensando que estaría con su maestro y compañeros actuales, pero eso no será el caso. El caso es de ir a una transición de modelo híbrido. La transición a un modelo híbrido hará que todos los estudiantes se mezclen con maestros que tal vez conozcan y con otros estudiantes con los que no hayan establecido relaciones. La transición al modelo híbrido interrumpe el progreso de mi hijo con su maestro y compañeros de clase, donde ya tienen un entorno de aprendizaje seguro y acogedor. También interrumpen los entornos de aprendizaje de todos los estudiantes en todo el distrito. También creo que es fundamental informar a las familias sobre cómo es realmente el modelo híbrido. Entiendo que solo será 2 veces por semana con un nuevo maestro por hora y media cada día. En los días libres, los estudiantes aprenderán de forma asincrónica, es decir, ver videos grabados. Es posible que algunos padres no sepan qué es la escuela en un modelo híbrido. No será normal. Los estudiantes no podrán trabajar en grupos, compartir libros, materiales, leer en pareja. En cambio, se les pedirá que permanezcan en su escritorio, usen una máscara y también que trabajen de forma independiente. El distrito North Clackamas ha comunicado a las familias que estamos en el centro de sus decisiones y que el bienestar y la seguridad socioemocional de cada niño es lo más importante. Aún así, no se siente así para mí como madre. y especialmente como madre latina. Les pido que no abran las escuelas y espero que estén escuchando a todas las voces en nuestra comunidad y no solo la voz de privilegio al tomar sus decisiones esta noche. I also think it's essential to inform families of what the hybrid model truly looks like. I understand that it will only be twice a week, face-to-face instruction for an hour and a half each day. On the off day, students will be learning asynchronously. Some parents may not even be aware that a hybrid model will not be normal. Students will not be allowed to work in groups, share books or materials, partner read. Instead, they will be asked to remain at their desk, wear a mask, and work independently. North Clackamas has communicated to families that we are at the center of the decision and that social emotional well-being and safety of every child is what is most important. Still, it does not feel like that for me as a mom, and especially as a Latina mom. Please do not transition to a hybrid model. I hope that you are listening to all voices in our community and not only the voices of privilege when making your decision tonight. Thank you for your time.
Gracias, Teresa. Next, I don't believe this person's here either. I will circle back around at the end. Renee Orme-Jarmer, please unmute your mic. You can go ahead and begin, Renee.
Hi, good evening. Hello, the North Clackamas School Board and everyone here on Zoom. My name is Renee Orme-Jarmer, and I am the director of the Rex Putnam Kingsman Thunder Drumline. The Drumline was established in 2009 and has grown to be a well-known award-winning program that serves Rex Putnam, its feeder schools, and other students in the district. We have been virtual since August, and my request here tonight is that the board allow the Drumline to condition just as the other athletics have been allowed to since November. I am advocating as a Putnam alum, a product of a strong music program, a percussion education specialist, a parent in the district, and as a spouse, my spouse is a 30-year veteran at Rex Putnam High School, and I'm also advocating for a program that has 1 foot in band and also 1 foot, in athletics. I am passionate about this program and the benefits it has brought to many members, the community, and the school district. The Drumline can conduct contactless, masked conditioning following all safety protocols. Much of our competition has already started to do this. Glencoe High School, Century High School, St. Helens, Ridgeview, and many others are preparing to follow suit. However, we have not been allowed the same treatment that dance and cheer and other OSAA sports. Drumline categorization has been a problem from day one. We've been placed in a club status along with other indoor sit-down clubs such as Model UN, Environmental Club, Speech Debate, and others that do not have an athletic component at all. We are not independent and are considered a district activity, one that attracts students to this district on a regular basis. Drumline may not be currently designated OSAA sport, but it has its own governing competition guidelines. We can socially distance and condition outside doing drill blocks just as dance team and cheer can. My staff and myself have worked hard to provide a virtual curriculum. However, at this point, the members is getting very screen weary, and seeing that others are allowed to condition is a point of equity here, how we're being treated versus other sports. I have submitted my comments to the board that I'm not going to have time to finish all my comments here, but there is a new University of Colorado study out that talks about aerosol guidelines and that band and music activities, it's not only viable but also safe to hold these activities, and Drumline can be outside. We are used to being outside. It's an outdoor activity. We have all the equipment to do so. And so I have the information of the study. If anybody wants to contact me from the board, I'm happy to provide that. I'm going to jump down to the end of my presentation here because I won't be able to go on and on, but there are many agencies, not just the OSAA, but the ODE and the OHS and the Oregon Music Association, Teachers Association, that all have this information now. So I really want the board to consider the equity here in allowing sports and not allowing some of the other groups that can be outside. We're the only competitive drumline in this district and surrounding districts.
Renee, you're a minute over your time.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I think I've said what I need to say, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And you did make a comment about board members reaching out to you. My suggestion to you is that if you have something we want us to review, is that you send it to us.
Thank you. I will do that.
Mhm.
Thank you, Renee. I do not see the other two people on the list, but I'll just do a call out just in case I missed them. We're looking for Shannon Adams and John Simonson. Okay, Chair, I do not believe they're here. Hand it back over to you.
Thank you, everyone who has taken their time out to give us comments, whether it's verbally today or through email. We do read every single word. Your input and your comments are important to us. We appreciate when people take the time out to do just that. So thank you all for what you have submitted so far. Next thing on our agenda is the reopening of schools, athletic, and facilities. I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Utterback. Hey, how are you today?
Good evening, everyone. Give me a second to share my screen. There we go. So I'd like to say good evening to our board of directors tonight, our parents, our students, our staff that are watching this board meeting virtually. Our meeting tonight has one main agenda item, which is the status of reopening our schools, our athletics, and facilities. I have members of our leadership team here tonight joining me that can also assist in answering questions. We are about a year into what is likely going to be a 2-year pandemic. And since we closed schools in March, we've built 3 different instructional models: distance learning for all, comprehensive distance learning, and our virtual online program. And today we continue to build an elementary hybrid model, and we continue to modify that based on feedback. And we're also building a limited in-person option for our students. So tonight, what I'd like to go over quickly with our board, because I know our board would like some lengthy time to discuss, debate, and ask some questions on the recommendations that I'm presenting tonight. But I'll review the superintendent recommendations. They have shifted since our last board meeting. Remind the community where we are in our current status around instructional models. Talk about the new health metrics that have changed since our last meeting. Review the current Clackamas County health metrics. Give an update on vaccine availability and actually vaccine distribution that's happening currently. A quick status update of our elementary hybrid model, as well as limited in person, an update on activities and athletics, and some new information on community use of district facilities. And then we'll turn it back over to our board for questions and discussion. So as a reminder, these have been since the beginning of the pandemic and continue to be through our current planning, the district's guiding thoughts. I think I've reviewed them probably now at a good 10 to 15 board meetings, and just providing them an opportunity here to enter into our meeting space tonight. We also continue to be guided by our Ready School Safe Learners guidance, which you'll recall has over 160 required safety and health protocols that districts must have operational prior to bringing students back onto our campuses. In addition, each of our buildings have operational blueprints for re-entry, which is the plan that operationalizes those 160 health and safety requirements and protocols. And operational blueprints for each of our schools can be found on the district website under our reopening tab. We've heard certainly a lot from our community, our staff, and our parent community regarding making decisions based on equity. North Clackamas continues to be guided by our district's equity lens, and the 7 questions of our lens are projected on your screen. There's also decision-making tools, focus, and equity that the Oregon Department of Education has provided school districts with regards to reopening schools. So tonight, I'm coming forward with 5 recommendations for the board. They could be taken separately tonight, should you choose to take action, or in one group. Those recommendations address 3 areas: the reopening of our schools, the expansion of high school athletics, and expanding the opportunity for our community to access our fields. So the first recommendation is that we would implement a grades K-1 elementary hybrid delivery model when the employees that are working with our grade K-1 elementary school students have had the opportunity for both of their COVID-19 vaccine doses, and after Clackamas County has met the health metrics for returning to in-person instruction for 2 consecutive weeks. The second recommendation builds on the first, and it is that we would expand elementary hybrid model to grades 2-3 when employees working with grades 2-3 elementary school students have had the opportunity for both COVID-19 vaccine doses, and with Clackamas County still meeting those health metrics for returning to in-person instruction, and approximately 2 weeks after implementing the elementary K-1 hybrid delivery model. All other grades would remain in comprehensive distance learning. It's important to note that we're not saying that those other grades will not move into a hybrid model. We would pause at the implementation of the grades 2-3. We would assess how it's going, provide us an opportunity to modify and make adjustments, and then bring back potentially further recommendations for our board to consider the expansion of in-person instruction at that time. The third recommendation is to allow the district to begin the implementation of limited in-person instruction at all grades across the district, as long as the state health metrics for returning to in-person instruction continue to be met. Our fourth recommendation deals with athletics, which is to allow district high schools to participate in Oregon School Activities Association, OSAA, approved and designated high school activities, following all the safety and health protocols for athletes, coaches, and spectators that's being outlined by the Oregon Health Authority and the OSAA. And our final recommendation is to open rental of North Clackamas fields to all local youth service nonprofit athletic groups for the spring season beginning March 22nd. And again, following all state and health and safety protocols. So where we currently stand as a district, to remind our folks watching tonight, is back in October, our board took the following action, which was to continue in comprehensive distance learning for kindergartners through 12th grade through second quarter, which ends on February 9th. And you authorized the superintendent to pilot small group instruction on site according to the state guidelines and safety protocols. I want to remind the community that shortly after the board took this action, if you recall, in November and December, infection rates skyrocketed in Oregon, and we paused that pilot. You allowed for our high school students to participate in practices and conditioning after school, and you directed us to revisit these timelines should the required COVID-19 Oregon health metrics for in-person instruction be modified. And we do know that they have been modified. So the changes to the state health metrics happened actually over winter break and then again on January 19th. I believe on December 23rd, the governor sent a letter to the director of the OHA, the Oregon Health Authority, and the director of the Oregon Department of Education. And in that, she prioritize elementary education and returning elementary students, particularly younger grades, to in-person instruction. In that communication on January 1st, she changed the health metrics for returning to in-person instruction from mandatory to advisory. And she directed those two directors of the state agencies to adjust or to review the health metrics that were in place at that time, and they have done that. So we now have new state health metrics for reopening. And previously, the upper threshold for transitioning to on-site or hybrid instruction at the elementary level, that's the orange column that you see there in the top row, was 200 cases per 100,000 residents. And that has now gone up to 350 cases per 100,000 residents. This is based on the Harvard Global Health Institute research, which shows that over 350 cases per 100,000 people in the population is where the spread of COVID-19 is a destabilizing factor in schools. Below 350 cases per 100,000 in the population, schools have demonstrated an ability to maintain stable environments if they are following health and safety protocols, including physical distancing, hand washing and sanitizing, and wearing masks. So where does Clackamas County currently stand? Clackamas County has met the advisory metric to begin the transition of elementary students to in-person instruction for the 4 previous weeks, going back to January 23rd. I share that, and at the same time that the metrics, that we have been meeting the metrics in Clackamas County, and they have been declining over the past 4 weeks, there is also concern from local researchers and epidemiologists of a potential infection surge beginning in mid-February due to pandemic fatigue, or individuals are not following the health and safety protocols to the level that they need to. And with the potential of increased spread in infections due to various variants of this virus that appear to be more contagious. At the same time that the metrics were changed and adjusted, we've had a lot of news and developments around vaccine availability. And so what we know is during the week of January 11th, our governor came out and announced vaccinations for K-12 employees to start being administered beginning the week of January 25th. And that happened. I believe the first North Clackamas employees started getting vaccinated yesterday. The governor hoped to have most of the K-12 employees vaccinated within 2 weeks. It appears that that will likely take longer, probably multiple weeks, to get all K-12 employees to receive their vaccination. North Clackamas is prioritizing employees based upon their job role, and we're really focusing on reinstating in-person instruction and providing vaccine access to those employees who are most likely to have direct, prolonged contact with our students in enclosed spaces. And what I can share with the community is that we have approximately 900 district employees that are needed to safely initiate the K-3 in-person hybrid instructional model. And these employees will need to be given the opportunity to be vaccinated prior to fully implementing the K-3 elementary hybrid model under the recommendations I previously reviewed. And overall, the district has about 2,700 individuals that are eligible for the vaccine at this time. So the elementary hybrid model, to remind folks where we are continuing with that planning. And one of the reasons why we have put out an initial plan of what that hybrid model will look like when we asked our parents for feedback back in late November and early December, There's a 4-page handout that was sent to all families in multiple languages, and that document sits on our COVID website today. We continue to work with our Teachers Association and also feedback that we are receiving daily from parents on revising and adjusting that model. And once we believe that we have that model in a place that likely will not change, we will share that with our community. Again, that would start K1 and then roll up to grades 2, 3. And again, we would then assess how well the model is working before potentially expanding it to additional grades. Again, just remind those that are watching, we did a survey, as I referenced, in November and December. We're generally extremely pleased with the response that we received. We received feedback from over about 85% of our elementary families. And I will say that was due to a huge lift on the part of our elementary staff to ensure that we heard from as many families as we could. That was both through multiple reminders to complete the survey, which was available in multiple languages, as well as follow-up phone calls to families that we hadn't yet heard from. And what we know from examining the data results is that response results among demographic groups was generally within 10%, 10 percentage points of the averages that you see on the screen there. And that response rates among demographic groups was similar. We continue to have conversations with our staff, both interviews and surveys, to determine their availability and address their concerns and questions regarding moving to a hybrid model. And our principals at the elementary level have started meeting with school level teams to continue to revise and develop their health, safety, and instructional practices that are specific to their school and their facility. Again, while we continue with daily instruction and school operations, right, we continue, as I've said, to refine the daily schedule for the hybrid, determine the number of class sections per grade at each school, determine which teachers will teach in the hybrid model and which will remain in comprehensive distance learning, as we will continue to provide that as an option for families. We continue to work on health and safety protocols and getting prepared to roll out training to our staff on what will be different, having students in our buildings. Bus routes and meal service continues to work on their plans as well. Once the decision is made to move to a hybrid model, we have quite a bit of work to do to recall our employees that have been laid off, primarily bus drivers and nutrition service workers. Staff need to be trained, parents need that communication that was referenced in our community comments tonight, and we need to make sure that we have adequate staffing, and that is probably primarily in the area of substitutes. When staff do become ill, do we have the adequate staffing to keep the hybrid model operating? We've referenced limited in-person instruction, and one of the third recommendation is to allow the district to begin limited in-person instruction as additional supports to students. Again, this does not replace comprehensive distance learning. It's small cohorts of students, about 20 students, short periods of time each week. It's about 2 hours maximum, and provide additional academic and social support to students. High school athletics and activities, not much has changed in this arena since our last board meeting 2 weeks ago. We're getting closer to season 2, which is formerly the fall season of cross-country football, soccer, and volleyball. Those practices are scheduled to begin on February 8th, depending on the sport, and through February 22nd, and then the season would run through April 11th. What we know today is cross-country and soccer are allowed to compete within Clackamas County, which still remains in an extreme risk level. All indoor activities are prohibited when a county is in the extreme risk category, and full contact sports remain prohibited across the state. There is speculation that there'll be some additional guidance coming out tomorrow from OHA and the governor's office regarding high school athletics. And so we're awaiting that information. And then finally, community use of district facilities. What the recommendation includes tonight is that district fields will be available to local youth serving nonprofit athletic groups starting on March 22nd. District programs, including high school athletics, will retain priority use for district grounds, and because they may need to expand their footprint to some of our K-8 fields to address distancing and cohorting guidelines. This may limit some access to district fields. In-season facility use priority will remain the same as defined in district policy KGAR. Fall sports will not be able to claim priority scheduling for the spring season, even if they miss their season due to the impacts of COVID-19. But all groups will be required to fully comply with current guidance from the Oregon Health Authority and the governor. And each community group requesting field space must submit to our Director of Community Service a return to play plan, demonstrating their readiness to meet the state guidelines and requirements. Additionally, each group will sign a COVID-19 facility use liability release form as recommended by the Oregon School Boards Association. So I will pause my presentation and turn back over to Chair Ford for questions and board discussion.
Excellent. Thank you, Superintendent Utterback, for that information. We appreciate you gathering all of this so we can continue to discuss. Board, a couple reminders. This is an action item, and as Superintendent mentioned earlier, we have the ability of separating them out or voting as a whole. I'd like to interject a third option, and that is to vote on them in the 3 segments that Superintendent has presented. And so that would be the reopening segment, the expansion of athletics, and then the community access to fields. So it's 3 different options that we have in terms of the action item as a whole, as 5 separate recommendations, or my suggestion to add to that is the 3 segments of those 5 separate recommendations. So I'll do a round robin, starting with you, Director Stradle.
The 3 groupings would be preferable.
Okay. Director Benaloga.
Yes, the 3 groupings is fine with me as well. Thank you.
Okay. Director Perez.
Yes, Chair. 3 groupings, fine with me as well.
Excellent. Director Way.
The same as what other board members have said with the 3.
Okay. Director Bauer.
3 sounds great.
Awesome. Director Perez, I had you on here twice. I'm about to call you again. And I also would like consensus about the 3 groupings. So let's go ahead and start some conversation. The floor is open. This is an action item, so I'll leave it up to you to choose how you want to navigate this. If you choose to start with the motion, I'm fine with that. Otherwise, we can also have some discussion. I do understand that is out of protocol in terms of Robert's rules, just so the public knows, but this is a very, very serious subject. So I want to make sure that we're all very clear about where we're going. So the floor is open. Raise your hand if you'd like me to call on you. Director Stradle.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to start with just some foundation questions because they will apply to like all 3 potential motions. Superintendent Utterback, the current, what is the current status of Clackamas County in is it extreme risk is the current status of Clackamas County?
Yes, there are 2. So there are 2 sets of, I guess, metrics or statuses for a county. One is around athletics and restaurants and athletic venues. There's that status, and in that status, Clackamas County is an extreme risk. In regards to school reopening, we are now in the orange column, which allows for the transition to in-person instruction.
Okay. But I will point out that Clackamas County is in a definition of extreme risk. You had a slide deck that showed the governor's goals, and one of the bullet points said moves the health metrics for returning to in-person instruction from mandatory to advisory. So the question would be, does that mean that the health metrics that are in those columns are advisory or required?
I believe the governor's intent in making the metrics advisory is, in doing so, she's shifted the decision making from the state to the board level in the state of Oregon.
Okay, and I do apologize for doing some of these questions. I'm sure other board members would have them as well. You referenced a university that did a study that basically said 350 is, but it referenced when it was 350, it would be bad. 350 or greater is bad. So I do put forward to the community that 349 is also not where you want to be. And the biggest challenge I have when I'm learning more, hearing from the community, is there still is a pandemic happening. And if the petri dish of the United States, if there was a United States shaped petri dish, the virus wants to go where it is not dominant. It is seeking out hosts. And so I'm not on board with 350 as a metric. And so part of the discussion and will probably be is through Robert's rules. If there's a motion, I will be doing a motion to amend to set the metrics at 200 and see what this board feels. Because if it doesn't pass, then it doesn't. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you, Director Strado. I left out Director McVeigh on my question, and I apologize. That's why I had Perez twice. Director McVeigh, what do you say in terms of our choices?
3 is great.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I apologize. Charge
No
it to
worries.
my mind, not my heart. You know, I love you guys. Okay, anyone else have something they want to ask of Superintendent Utterback? And the floor is also still open. Director McVeigh?
Oh, okay.
Go ahead,
I'll have
Kathy.
Tori. Okay, sorry.
I'll do Director McVeigh. Sorry, Director Way, you can go right after him.
So mine was on the same line as Stephen's. Matt, was the 350 from Harvard. That was the worst number. The lower numbers, were they just made up by OHA as guidelines, or did they also break out the 50 to the 100 to that? Do we know?
I do not know. What has been communicated to superintendents is that the metrics were based off that Harvard study. So I assume it's all the metrics and just not the elementary.
Okay.
And
should we ask all of our questions, Lieber, or do you just want us to do one?
Yeah, go for it. Knock them
Okay.
out.
I'm assuming the 322 return community fields opportunity was because of high school athletics and our unknown need to use those fields, because that's kind of a long way since we know outdoor works. And so I want our community to know why we picked such a far out date.
yes, and the fact that getting lots of people on our fields in the middle of the winter does damage. And so we don't traditionally have a lot of people on our fields in January and February, simply because they're, our grass fields are pretty muddy.
Okay.
So that also plays a factor. We need a few weeks to get the grass cut and get them, get them ready as well. And we can't put our large lawnmowers on those fields right now. Otherwise, there'll be massive ruts.
And then in the spirit of social emotional learning, is there an opportunity in our definition of limited in-person learning for clubs and affinity groups in small groups to be able to meet on campus and have that connection that they've been missing except virtually?
Yes, we're looking at kind of I believe a phased rollout of limited in-person instruction and I would say it hasn't been defined yet. We're engaging our high school principals and our middle school principals, particularly the secondary level, around looking at student data, right? Which students aren't being successful, which students maybe do we have some social emotional concerns with. But we're also looking, right, how can we expand after school clubs and opportunities for kids? So it's under discussion and consideration, and we will eventually, if you give us permission tonight to begin to roll that out, we will begin to finalize those plans and communicate that to our community.
And my last question, or my last is not a question, but a comment, and I'm just really pleased that you'll continue to look at different hybrid models, because we have heard from both, mainly from our instructional staff that the 2-day-a-week hybrid model isn't real popular in a number of ways, just the connection and just kids being on their own for 3 days. And I know there's other models out there, and so I just really applaud, like North Clackamas always does, is, you know, look to see what is working elsewhere and to do it even better. So thank you.
You're welcome. And Tori, you referenced the metrics, and I pulled up the Clackamas County, I pulled up the county metric chart, and it's updated every Monday. It does a 3-week look back on cases in Clackamas County. So it was 349 back on January 9th. It's dropped, then it dropped to 308 on January 16th. And this Monday, it dropped to 226 cases per 100,000. So that's where we are.
Hopefully trend is our friend.
Director Way.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Director McVeigh, for some of those questions. I did want to piggyback on some of them. So this is a great segue. One of my first questions is around sort of that parent survey piece and just the ongoing parent engagement. I really appreciate some of the parents tonight for showing up and, you know, really, I think directly sharing their story and experiences to the board, because sometimes we only just see things on a very high level and don't get down to, you know, how policies and the things that we're saying are really translating down to the family level, right, and the community level, and into people's homes. So my question is around that 15% of elementary that did not connect via the parent survey. If you can tell us a little bit more about what that 15% looks like that, you know, did not engage for whatever reason. And then you had referenced, Superintendent, that, you know, it sounded like we seem to be doing quite well in reaching demographic groups. There was, you know, I saw that sort of 10% differential. But I also know that there's a lot of caveats in terms of how we're defining as what are the demographic groups, right? Can you tell us a little bit more specifically about the groups that we need to be reaching out in their own language? I'm specifically thinking about a lot of the Pacific Islander community, you know, newcomers, refugee students, ELL. So not just the main languages that we commonly serve through, you know, our translation or other departments, but other groups of students and families that we may be missing. So that would be my first question. And then I have a couple just follow-up questions.
Yeah, I would say overall the survey results, and again, that included a lot of follow-up phone calls when we didn't hear from families. The 15% that we didn't hear from, I would say it was a fairly that 15% matched the demographics of the school district. There were really no significant outliers as far as, a specific demographic group. Since then, we then identified that 15% and sent mailed home letters now, asking again for them to contact the school and to share with us their preference and their perspectives, and, to call and see if there was questions that they had. So since then, we now have sent out letters to those families as well. And as you're aware, we have community liaisons in our school district in the major languages of our school district, and we're actually looking to expand that through a student investment account and bringing a couple more folks on board in that arena. And so we lean on them and utilize them as well. They have strong relationships with those families and those communities. It can often help us increase our engagement and our response when we need feedback.
Thank you. And for the folks, again, who we're sending letters and follow up to, are we using any type of culturally sensitive approach or even trauma-informed approach? So not just cold calling someone, but really being, I think, intentional and aware of, there might be a lot of different barriers or challenges that families are going through right now, particularly given COVID, and maybe, many other stressors in their lives that we just may not fully acknowledge.
Absolutely. Families have a lot of things, obviously a lot that they're holding together, and families have a lot of concerns and challenges right now. Initially, those calls were made from the school. And so hopefully, families would see that the school was calling because they should hopefully have a relationship with that school community. And then again, leaning on our community liaisons that have relationships with many of those families as well. There's a relationship there, and there's some comfort there with our families and those liaisons, and leveraging that relationship and that comfort level.
Thank you. And then just sort of my last piece, I have other questions, but I'll yield my time for other folks. But just my last comment, it was sort of what Director McVeigh was saying earlier in terms of, the affinity groups for students, right, to really sort of connect and talk about what they're anxious about, what they're stressed about, but just have sort of that community. I think it would be wonderful to have that for our parents, quite frankly, not just through PCLA, although PCLA is wonderful, but just other affinity groups for, other ethnic groups or other parents, in their apartment complexes or neighborhoods. And I think as one board member, for me personally, I would love to join any of those conversations if they're happening or if our district is hosting, but I would like to offer that suggestion as well, just so that, again, as a board member, we really see things on a very, very high level, and we don't get down to, right, like how folks are really experiencing things on the ground. So I don't know if those are starting up in any of the schools right now that you know of. I also want to give a shout out to a lot of teachers right now who may be not only teaching our kids virtually, but who also may be wearing that other hat, right, of like trying to pull together 5 or 10 parents just to offer them social support. So I don't know, is that something that you feel like we're doing now? And if not, can we do that? Can we start being more intentional?
I think there have been some intentional efforts at some schools to do that virtually, and continue some of the affinity group and club work, virtually. You heard from one of our community members today of the drumline can't meet in person. They figured out how to do that virtually. That's happening across the district. Obviously, we have some structures in place for some affinity group, parent affinity group. Our madres have continued to meet and doing that virtually. And I think we can certainly, perhaps leverage and lean on our community liaisons to see their capacity potentially for doing that, district-wide.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask other questions as they pop up later, but thank you, Chair Ford.
Thank you, Director Way. Director Bauer.
Thank you, Chair Ford. I will follow up a bit on some of the previous questions, and thank you, fellow board members. As far as the survey that was sent out, that was in November. And I think, we're finding out more about hybrid also. And one of the lens of inequity is what are unintended consequences. And I think, our staff, our parents are finally saying, seeing this, focused on it. Would they have a chance to change their mind? And is there more information that you will be sending out in different forms? Because everyone's busy and, they're getting, if they get a whole booklet, they may not be able to read it, so I'll let you answer.
Yep, it is a great question. And the answer is yes, more information is going to come. You'll notice that there's not a date on these recommendations regarding when we're going to reopen, and that is intentional. One of the things that you've heard me say for a year now is that we don't control this pandemic. This pandemic has controlled us for the last year. And we've tried very hard as a school district is not to put firm dates out there where then families make plans and then we only have to dash hopes and force parents to make changes. And so we've been very cautious and very careful to say to our, when we make a decision and we're ready to communicate that, it will be hopefully, absolutely accurate. And so we know that parents have some questions and want to know more about what that hybrid will look like, and we're going to get that out to them, just as we did when we started comprehensive distance learning. We put together, a 10-15 page document that really went through what that was going to look like and tried to paint a picture for our students and our families. And we will do that with the hybrid model as well. We also know that reading a 10 or 15 page document isn't, that's not how everyone wants to receive that information. And so as recently this week, we've talked about, doing a video and going into a classroom, showing kids and families what the classroom will look like. It will look different. Right? There's going to be half as many desks there. There will be other furniture that is normally in a classroom isn't going to be there. There's going to be arrows on the floor and and signage, and so it's going to look different. And so we want to show folks that. And so as those classrooms are getting set up now, we'll likely produce a video that will help paint a picture for folks on what this will look like. But getting and I want, under these recommendations that are coming forward tonight, I want to get back to this idea. There's no dates on there. People will ask me, when do we think we could start a K-1 elementary hybrid? For me, it is probably when you look at this vaccine schedule and first dose, usually 21 or to 28 days gap in between, depending on the type of vaccine. And then up to 10 to 14 days after the second dose. We're probably, if everything goes perfectly and everyone can follow the vaccine schedule, we're probably looking at a March 29th possibility to begin that elementary K-1 hybrid. And that's the Monday after spring break. We're also trying to tie it to a natural break in the schedule.
Thank you. I just have one other, and I'm glad that it was brought up about the clubs and activities. And music is so important to people as an emotional stress release too. If there's some way band can be practicing under the, in the bleachers or something, if they're willing to, music choir, all of that. And even CTE eventually. I know there's problems with kids coming from all over the district, and then you have multiple, the cohorts problem, but I know you're working and this is student-centered, and we are concerned, and we are aware that people are hurting and that the inequities make it even harder. So we want to do it safely though. So I appreciate what you're doing and taking the time to really know all of the guidelines. I mean, people know about Ready Set, the Ready Schools Safe Learners, 91 pages. It started out as 50 or 60. We have planning for COVID-19 scenarios, another 41 pages. We have ensuring equity and access, 44, and CDL is 64. And those are kind of just some of the main documents that have been evolving that
Yes.
I'm just
There
trying
is-
to keep up with some of it.
There is also guidance. We hope tomorrow, we're not, no one's given a date on it, but there is going to be upcoming guidance on the performing arts and how we can begin to provide those opportunities. You know, one of the things that obviously is we know about the performing arts is that they have been in the past super spreader events. And so trying to do that safely is obviously of the utmost concern to us. Right? When you've got students blowing into an instrument, there's no mask on that instrument, or you have kids singing, right? Having that mask on, what's the spacing? So we're having those conversations and are awaiting that guidance from the state on performing arts.
Well, I appreciate the care of and interest of safety and health. Thank you. And keeping our teachers healthy too. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bauer. We haven't heard from Director Perez or Director Benaloga.
I am ready, Chair Ford.
Okay, Director Benaloga.
Thank you. So I have a few questions, Superintendent. As far as limited in person, vaccines will also, are the vaccines also tied to the teachers that will be teaching limited in person, I assume? But it wasn't stated specifically, so I wanted to ask.
That's a great question. We're going to look and see if we can roll out some volunteers first.
Okay.
Obviously, there'll be some small groups, but we know we've got some staff that we think would be willing to do that. And then, yes, as the vaccine rolls out, really start to ramp that up.
Okay, excellent. And then with that March 29th target date, do you have a sense that everyone that needs to be vaccinated will be able to be vaccinated in the district in order to start that hybrid model? And I know you're not, I know you're not a fortune teller, but what is there a sense that we're going to be able to vaccinate everyone that wants or needs one?
With 2 days of vaccines under our belt, it is going well. Our staff are getting appointments, and we're starting to work into later waves of our priority here in the coming weeks. So I remain hopeful today that we could have all of our K1 staff that wanted to be vaccinated will be vaccinated, and all the support staff, and that if everything is in place, the metrics are still there, then that March 29th date looks promising. But again, I will say that's, from Monday, that was 8 weeks. That's 8 weeks out from, this past Monday. That's a long time in this pandemic. It's a very long time in this pandemic.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. I know that we all do not know what's going to happen in the future. I also want to echo Director Bauer's sentiments that we do understand that our community is struggling, that not everyone is being successful in CDL, and that our families are economically and emotionally and mentally struggling right now. It is a very, very hard and weighty decision that our board has to make, and that our district is working so hard at building these systems that not only keep people safe, but educate our kids. We need to remember that our district staff is there because they wanted to educate their kids. 2 more questions. When you sent the survey out, did families have an idea of what the hybrid model would look like, or did it just say, do you want your kids to go back hybrid, or do you want them to stay home?
Yeah, there was a 4-page description of what the elementary hybrid would look like, could look like. There was a sample schedule that was in there. There was, some Q&A in there that we provided families. And so that was attached as a link within that survey. So families would have had to click on the link and, read another 4 pages. but that information was there, and it has been posted on our website. And I keep directing families and staff to that document as recently as this week in emails that I'm receiving.
All right, thank you for that clarity. And just one last question. We've heard some real concerns from educators about the current CDL model versus the instructional time and the instructional quality of the hybrid model. Can you talk a little bit about that and explain what those disparities might be?
Yeah. So we're looking at a model in which we would take our students at each grade level and put them into two cohorts, an A day and a B day cohort. And for the A day cohorts would come in on Monday and Tuesday, in the morning and stay through lunch, and then the B-Day cohorts would on Monday and Tuesday would be in some synchronous, asynchronous learning, and then it flips on Thursday and Friday. So Thursday and Friday, B is in person and A is doing some synchronous and asynchronous work. So we're also looking then at what the afternoon is for students, right? And that's, I think, that's been a shift that we've looked at based on some parent feedback and based on some teacher feedback of how we can have potentially some online instruction for the group of students that weren't in school that day. So we're continuing to work through that with our teachers. And it's multiple meetings a week as we try to refine and rebuild this, not rebuild it, but refine the schedule that we initially shared back in November. So I think we're probably a week or two away from getting that really finalized. And I think once that becomes finalized, we'll get that out to our community and allow them to see that.
Okay, and when we have that hybrid with K1, will we be able to bring in 2-5 for limited in person in the same building? How would that work?
Yes, so while we're 8 weeks away from potentially opening up K1, we also are looking at some limited in-person instruction opportunities at the elementary level. And you could theoretically do, right, we could be running a K3 hybrid model, and we've have some 4th and 5th graders that are in the buildings at sometimes, for limited in-person instruction.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Director Perez.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Ford. Couple questions. First, thank you, Superintendent, for the information and the presentation today. And also echo what Chair Ford said earlier about thank you to our community, all our families and parents and staff and teachers and everyone that have sent in feedback and comments and email messages. Because we do this as a village and we need everyone's input. So thank you. To echo what Chair Ford said. This is pretty heavy decision, pretty important. Working in the medical field, I've 30 plus years, I've seen a little bit of everything. So for me, this is to have this decision on this weight on all of our board. I keep thinking of our children, because we can't get our children back. If anything, God forbid, were to happen with COVID, we can't get a parent back. We can't get. That's where I go. We can't get our family back, grandparent back. We can always get back and recover education, but we can't recover our loved ones. So this is very hard. And I know for me, this is working in the medical field. This is peak time for flu viruses, and I know I've heard of the variant that's now has shown up in the States. And I think Superintendent, you said they're projecting the surge potentially in mid-February.
Yes,
So,
there are some researchers and epidemiologists that are predicting that. They presented to state superintendents last Tuesday, one individual researcher out of OHSU. And I will say at the same time, right, there are other researchers that are saying, maybe this decline that we're in is the beginning of the decline. And so, as you know, Director Perez, it seems like with everything with this this virus there and its relation to schools, there are multiple research opinions and multiple perspectives, and they don't agree.
Yeah. Well, so let's say come whenever that time is, numbers are down. Let's say let's hypothetically the variant nothing happens with that. And so come whenever, let's say hypothetically April or the 29th, whatever the date, there is no set date, but hypothetically, just to reiterate for our community and families and staff, will there be an option to stay in CDL for those that want to?
Absolutely. That actually is a state requirement.
Yep. Okay. And then I guess the only other question, a lot of the questions I had were asked by my fellow board members. So the only other question I had was, and I think Director Benaloga just kind of touched on that and her question on the CDL. I know my son, being a third grader, we were kind of talking to him the other day, and he said, if we go back to school, I'll get to see Miss Matthews. So he has a connection. He has this relationship with his teacher. So I started, I was thinking of all the kids. For those that go back into, let's say we do have that in-class startup, will those kids that go into the class in kindergarten, first grade, second, and third, have a chance to see that teacher they have on CDL now?
I appreciate the question, Orlando, and because I think it provides me an opportunity to explain to the community that what the initial parent survey showed was about, we'll just say 68% or so of our parents were at the time were interested in coming back to school in the hybrid model, and 32% or so were interested in staying in CDL. And so given that data, we know that we're going to need about a third of our teachers are going to need to stay in comprehensive distance learning and provide that for that student population. And 2/3 of our teachers are going to shift to the hybrid model. That is going to require, when that shift happens, and one of the community members referenced it, some students are going to shift teachers in this model. Students that are going to shift to the hybrid model, but their teacher is going to stay in CDL, right? Or going to see a different teacher. So we will do our best to limit that disruption. That is a disruption. I will do our best to limit those disruptions, but the reality is that some teachers are going to have to stay in CDL to provide that model for our student population, and those teachers may choose to continue to do that work from home.
Okay. Thank you, Superintendent.
You're welcome.
That's all, Chair Ford.
I have two questions. My first is, I had the privilege of talking to a North Clackamas School District school secretary, and she brought to my attention two things that I actually have not thought about. and I have not had any letters on it either. So I'd like to know how we're approaching it. Kindergarten students have never been in the building. First grade students were only in the building partially last year. So these are two grades that have never been in these massive buildings, which we all know when we were little people, small spaces were a lot bigger than they are when you return back as an adult. So how much time will be spent on just integrating comfort for students that have never participated in education in the buildings?
So that is again a great question, and we were in conversations in the last couple of weeks about, as we look over the course of these next potentially 8 weeks that we have while staff are getting vaccinated, can we leverage the limited in-person instruction to bring in some of those kindergartner students and start doing some of that orientation over the course of the next 8 weeks? Was a group that we said that they would probably benefit from that, obviously. So that, that's I think one idea that will help to, if we're able to do that, to, I think address some of those concerns and those questions.
Thank you. My second question is about disruption in education. We hear a lot of discussion pre-COVID. Disruption in education had statistics to it. So what is the statistic for learning loss when students have disruptions in education? What are the effects of that?
I think one of the pieces, I can't recite that off the top of my head, but any percentages, we as a country, we've never experienced this kind of disruption before, right? We have never shifted entire school systems to an online model. And, so there's certainly going to be the opportunity for a lot of research out there on what did the, COVID-19 pandemic have long-term on students. We continue to talk as educational systems about what are going to be some opportunities that we will have with regards to some of this COVID, you can call it COVID loss, but COVID recovery. So I think if we can, for this spring, if we can get students onto our campuses and do that safely, which I believe we can do, I think it opens the door for us to look at what summer looks like and how can we leverage some summertime to help with that recovery, maybe some of that instructional loss.
Excellent. And my last thing is a suggestion. Many of the letters that we've received from the community have suggestions that we have not looked at a particular area. And it's usually something very specific to what they're experiencing. And as we all know, that when you're in difficult times, your experience is all you can reference. So I would love if we could create a Wordle of all the things you guys have considered one-worders, right? Where the community can look and see all the things you guys consider. Because what I do know is that this district has considered a lot. And I don't want us to miss an opportunity to communicate all of these dynamic pieces that have been considered so that they can look at that list and see themselves on the Wordle and identify that they've been thought about. I hope the community can hear this. This is not an easy thing, as we all know, but there are so many people who are considering specifically your situation, and you may not know it. So my suggestion is that we have the Wordle so we can at least give people that visual and know that they're being thought about. Okay, so the floor is open. We've decided that we're going to vote on the 3 areas, so one area being reopening, the other area being expansion of athletics, and the last but not least area, community access to fields. So floor is open. All right, I just want to make sure that all directors are clear on where we're at. Because silence to me, like any other teacher, means maybe I haven't been clear. Director Schrader.
I'm going to jump to the third one because it kind of starts us off, and hopefully the conversation in the process. So I move approval of superintendent recommendation to allow district high schools to participate in Oregon School Activity Associations, OSAA, approved and designated high school activities follow all safety and health protocols for athletes, coaches, and spectators as outlined by the Oregon Health Authority and OSAA. And I believe because we're grouping, also included in this motion is to open rental of NCSD fields to local youth services, nonprofit athletic groups for the spring season beginning March 22nd, while following all state health and safety protocols.
So probably second, been moved and seconded by Director McVeigh. Thank you. Any additional discussion needed in this area?
I can, this is Director Schradel. I can support this because of the outdoor activities. The other OSAA has more time and energy to understand their expertise. And so I'm following their guidance.
Excellent. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. I'll do a roll call. Director Schradel, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Benaloga?
Aye.
Director Perez?
Aye.
Director Way?
Aye.
Director McVeigh?
Aye.
Director Bauer?
Aye.
And myself is also aye. Excellent. Floor is now open again.
This is Director Bauer. I am going to look at the second one then. I would like to accept the superintendent's recommendation on the limited in-person. Allow district begin the implementation of limited in-person instruction at all grades, as long as the state health metrics for returning to in-person instruction continue to be met. So is that right? Do I have it all?
Did you read the grouping? Is that the full grouping? Okay.
That's the second group.
Excellent. Been properly moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Been seconded by Director Perez. Any discussion needed?
I just would like to offer in discussion that, you know, I want us to continue to look at the science and public health and really trust in the data. And, you know, with this COVID pandemic, I keep thinking about it just takes one, right? It just takes one person to have COVID to bring it to their loved ones, carry it to their intergenerational families and households. And so I think that this is, you know, a decision that I don't take lightly at all, but I'm also trying to balance the realities of the challenges and the learning, you know, the learning realities that our families and our students are going through, while also trying to balance public health recommendations and also be really clear that we are literally creating and recreating systems every single day. We are reimagining how new systems in our healthcare and in public health and in our education can look like and can interact. And so for me, that's what I'm dealing with for, you know, as a board member. And so, you know, we're going to be making decisions that are going to have to take into consideration all of those things. And lastly, will just say that I know that for generations, our education system, public education system here in the US has not been working. for many, many communities and many, many families who have been, historically left out of decision making. And so that could also be a very depressing and negative state to always be in. But I choose to look at the positive, and I choose to look at the hope that something hopeful can come out of this pandemic. And that could be, again, reimagining what these new systems of learning and thinking and being healthy together can look like. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Director Wade, Director McVeigh, and then Director Schradel.
I just wanted to thank Kathy or Director Way for those comments. And I wanted to, in discussion, just clarify, if someone didn't feel safe or comfortable coming onto campus, even though I needed limited in-person instruction, we would find some other way to help them out. We wouldn't require them to put their family at risk if there were intergenerational health issues in the household or whatnot. That's a question I'm trying to clarify.
So just really quick, before you answer that, Superintendent Utterback. So I want to be clear that we're voting on number 2.
Right, limited in person.
Expansion of athletics.
The motion on the floor is on the agenda item is covering the third paragraph. Begin the implementation of limited in-person instruction at all grades.
Got it. Okay. I was confused because you guys are talking about stuff. I was like, why are we talking about this? Okay, go ahead. My bad.
No worries.
So Director McVeigh, to answer your question, we will not, nor should we force anyone onto our campuses that don't feel safe in doing so.
Thank you.
Director Schradel?
Superintendent Utterback, would you please just remind me and the community of all grades what the definition of small in-group means?
All grades is K-12. So passing this motion, you're giving the district the authority to do limited in-person instruction at all grades in the school district. And we could probably expand that to adult transition, which is beyond 12th grade. So I'll put that in there as well. And a small group is defined in Ready School Safe Learners as 20 or fewer in a cohort, and no more than, students can be in no more than 2 cohorts. There's limits on how many adults can be in adults. There's limits to requirements on the number of cohorts that adults can be in. And then the time limit is limited. So no more than 2 hours. And again, all the safety and protocols of Ready School Safe Learners all have to be in place for limited in-person instruction, just as it would for hybrid.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra, can you reread the motion, please?
Would you like me to read it, Libra?
Yeah, you stated it correctly.
Yes.
Yeah,
Would you like me to reread it?
yes.
Oh, okay. It was accept the superintendent's recommendation, the third paragraph. Begin the implementation of limited in-person instruction at all grades as long as the state health metrics for returning to in-person instruction continue to be met.
Okay, so I need clarity as chair because I'm confused at this moment and I don't want to move forward without being clear. We all agreed to vote on 3 sections, correct? So this is not a section, correct? This is a paragraph. Got it. So we're out. That's why I'm confused.
Oh,
I just want to be
okay.
clear. But the motion's on the floor. The motion's on the floor.
Yeah,
So we're already here. Director Schradel?
Yeah, this would be conversation or a discussion of the current motion that's on the floor. This one does also include, I'm jumping to a different screen, include following the state health metrics for returning for in-person. And so my motion to amend Director Bauer's motion would be to include the superintendent's recommendation. I'm going to retract. I'm going to be doing a motion to amend, so I don't wish to make a change.
Okay, motion
Chair
still.
Ford, can I just have a clarity or clarification question?
Yes.
So I guess I thought maybe the first two paragraphs had to do with hybrid. And then I took the limited in person to be the second. So was I off?
So the three segments that I heard Superintendent announce were reopening was one, and it had several sections. 2 was expansion of athletics. And 3, which we've already voted on, community access to our fields.
So the Director Shadle, that would be, we did pass the 2 together. So the
for community access, we did do together. Yes,
we did those together.
Right.
So I'm taking action on both the athletics recommendation regarding OSAA and the field rentals. So I
wait,
think
say it again. I missed your first part of your sentence.
The board has taken action on both the athletic recommendation and the field recommendation. That was the motion that Director Schradel made and passed. And so I think that's where the confusion is you wanted to separate both of those and they're together.
Got it.
Okay, so
now, what is remaining?
Now you're on that Lippy.
Okay. So the Lippy is now, is it a part of reopening or is it separated?
I just made the motion separate.
Okay. So when we do the reopening portion of it, just for clarity, doesn't mean we have to, this section is now away from that. Is everyone clear with me? Because I don't want us to continue to keep talking about something that, you know, is in another section. Director Schradel.
So I would like to do a friendly amendment to include the first 2 paragraphs, which I can read into the new motion to amend.
Excellent.
I motion to amend to include the superintendent recommendation of implementing a grades K1 elementary hybrid delivery model when employees working with grades K1 elementary school students have had the opportunity for both COVID-19 vaccine doses, and after Clackamas County has met the state health metrics for returning to in-person instruction for 2 consecutive weeks. And the second paragraph, expand the elementary hybrid model to grades 2-3 when employees working with grades 2-3 elementary school students have had the opportunity for both COVID-19 vaccine doses, and with Clackamas County still meeting the state health metrics for returning to in-person instruction, and approximately 2 weeks after implementing the K1 elementary hybrid delivery model, grades 4 through 12 will remain in comprehensive distance learning.
And properly moved, amended. The motion has been properly amended. Do I have a second?
McVeigh, second.
Been properly moved and amended. The motion has been properly amended and seconded. So now, just for clarity, the first motion that Director Bauer put on the table is now dead because we second that. So the discussion now is based on what Director Schradel has added to that first amendment. So any discussion needed?
The reason I amended the motion was to group all 3 items that have to deal with state health metrics so that they're together for one conversation.
Other discussion? Anyone need clarity points? Because I do understand that when there's amendments, it can be very confusing So please don't hesitate for clarity, because we want to all be clear on what we're voting on.
So Chair, yes, just so that I'm clear on this, we're voting on the first three sections that the superintendent. Okay, thank you.
Director Shrader?
Just for clarity, we're exclusively only voting to expand Director Bauer's motion of the third paragraph to include the first and second paragraph. A vote yes for this would not be approving paragraphs 1, 2, and 3. It would only be to be merging that. We would go back to the original motion now to include paragraphs 1, 2, and 3.
Yes, thank you for that, Director Shrader. Any other clarity needed? I like to take my time with amendments because they're not normally used. And so when you rush through it, people vote on something and they're not clear on where they are. So any other clarity needed before we vote on this amendment and then move towards an approval vote towards the full motion? Are we all good? Okay. Open the floor for voting. Director Shrader.
Aye.
On the amendment.
On the amendment, aye.
Director Benaloga on the amendment.
Aye.
Director Perez on the amendment.
On the amendment, aye.
Director Way on the amendment.
Aye.
Director McVeigh on the amendment.
Aye.
Director Bauer on the amendment.
Aye.
Excellent, and I'm also an aye. So now we are back to a motion that has been amended with those three things in there. Okay, any discussion on that? Director Shrader.
And I do, board, I do appreciate your, I do appreciate you. This is going to be a motion. And then if it passes, then I'll be able to do discussion. So the motion is to modify.
So are we, so clarity, because
Yep.
you're my, you know,
I appreciate that.
my Robert's Rules person. You're about to make a motion, but we just amended a motion that we never voted on.
Let me jump back to the screen where I see us. Chair Ford, we voted to amend Mitzi Bauer's, Director Bauer's motion to include all three paragraphs. So now we're back into a discussion phase of the three paragraphs in totality.
Perfect.
And so I wish to offer an amendment to the entire three paragraphs.
Got it. Okay, clarity.
Okay.
Are we all clear now? Go ahead and make your amendments.
First, you got to pull up. I seek approval. I do a motion to amend the wording of the three paragraphs that reference the phrases of Clackamas County has met the state metrics for returning to in-person instruction for 2 consecutive weeks, with the spirit of the following wording. Clackamas County health metrics for returning to in-person instruction shall be below 200 cases per 100,000 for 2 consecutive weeks.
Okay, it's been properly amended. Do I have a second for that amendment?
Second.
Okay. So
Director Perez.
amended and second by Director Perez. Any discussion or clarity needed about this amendment to the original motion? Director Bauer.
Just want to be sure the 200, when I look at the new state health metric for reopening, it's on-site and hybrid is 50 to 200. Transition is 200 to 350. So where's the 200 in that? The yellow column, the orange column? I just want to be sure I'm understanding, Director Schroedel. what you're asking.
And Chair Ford, may I respond?
Absolutely.
I'm seeking a motion to be less than 200. It's, and I guess I need to answer Director Bauer the long way of the why. We've all been on the board for different times. This is also for community to hear. I mean, because this is not an easy task for us, community. Please understand, we all have different life experiences, all different skills, all different amount of time to do research and different types of research. And so I'm going to start by saying school boards, our job is traditionally dealing with curriculum adoption, the number of days, the type of instruction, and because of the stress, I will use a small piece of humor and say that Superintendent Utterback exclusively picks the snow days, so you can direct your comments towards him. On July 16th, I presented data from Clackamas County and how we were doing, and I'm going to do my best to remember that because that was roughly 6 months ago. We had 33 students age 0 through 19 with very low that were hospitalized with no mortality. That data today, and I should say in July 16th, the infection rate from age 0 through 20 was at 15.3%. Today's numbers, age 0 through 9 is at 5.1% per 100,000, and 10 through 19, age 10 through 19 is 10.2. So it's at the 15.3 it was in July of 2020. Hospitalizations have doubled. We've had one mortality. Hospitalizations of age 0 through 9 is now 1.1%. So the cases are low. So why would Director Schradel, myself, be so passionate about this? We don't have a lot of trend. You know, we have this data from January and it's looking good. It is. I'm happy to see the numbers be there, but I'd like to see a longer trend than what it is, because if we're wrong, a student, pre-symptomatic, asymptomatic, could go home and give it to a multi-generational home, could give it to a parent who's that vulnerable, or a grandparent, and that scar, that emotional scar of growing up, knowing that you participated or you unknowingly gave a loved one COVID, weighs heavily on me. The Y200, it gives us the flexibility. When I hear 350 and higher is bad, like really, really bad, if we're at 200, it gives us time to flex and mold and find out what it is. You know, if we are wrong, people don't come back, and we will contribute to the spread of this virus. I'm sorry to take so much time. I will end with this. A student sitting in a chair listening sheds virus, pre-symptomatic, asymptomatic, the least. A student asking a question sheds virus at a higher rate. A teacher projecting their voice sheds virus at the highest rate, just like if they were a singer. Now, I understand we're going to be vaccinating our staff, but we cannot require staff to be vaccinated. We cannot require them to do that. So there are people who don't believe that this virus is real. And the last thing I will say is it's also flu season. We closing down, opening up, closing down, opening up, the disruption to the students and to the families is detrimental. And I hope I answered your question, Director Bauer.
Director Bauer.
Thank you, Director Schradel. And I do agree it's utmost to have in mind care and safety. But yeah, that my question was, And maybe the superintendent can answer, how is that changing the yellow and orange on the metrics from the county? Because what I see is now, the orange was we can transition between 200 and 350. So I think what I'm hearing you say, Director Schradel, is that now we can't begin to transition until 200, but how does that change going back to on-site and hybrid?
So Director Bauer, for clarity, his amendment says below 200.
But I'm asking for what category I just want to be sure I understand.
So the 200 to 350 is one category, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So below
And that's
200.
okay. So only that category.
Yeah.
It's just going to be below 200. That doesn't change the on-site and hybrid, correct? I just want to clarify that.
It changes the metric that is specifically needed. That's what he's asking to amend, that metric be below 200, not the 350.
Okay. So it's just one number in the orange category. The yellow doesn't change. Is that correct? Superintendent Utterback, is that the way you're taking it?
Yes, I believe the amendment would essentially eliminate the orange column for consideration in our school district, and that we would not transition to the elementary hybrid until we were below 200 for 2 consecutive weeks.
Right. So 199 would be the beginning of consideration.
I just want to be sure I understood that. Thank you.
Out of the 200 to 350 range. Correct, Director Schradel? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Clarity about the amendment. Clarity needed, discussion needed about the amendment. And I want to restate the fact that we are on the second amendment, and it is specific to the metric being below 200 to amend that amended motion. Are we all clear? Okay. It's been properly moved and seconded, so we're going to vote on the second amendment.
Sorry.
Did I miss someone? Does someone need to say something else? Okay. Roll call for that. Director Schradel, second amendment.
Aye.
Director Benaloga, second amendment.
Aye.
Director Perez, second amendment.
Aye.
Director Way, second amendment.
Aye.
Director McVeigh, second amendment.
Nay.
Director Bauer, second amendment.
Aye.
Director Ford, myself, I say aye. So we have 6 ayes and 1 nay for the second amendment. That means the motion is carried. So now our original motion has 2 amendments to it. Are we all clear on what we are now at? The first amendment added 2 paragraphs to the original motion about Lippy. So we added in the other 2 things to the first one the first time. And now we just changed in one of the categories, there's a metric. Now we just voted to change that metric to 200 to below 200. But we still have the 3 things grouped together. Are we clear?
So maybe I'm not. So then we would, at below 200, we would immediately be eligible for elementary on-site. We'd be eliminating the orange, and we would just have the yellow and green health metrics for returning to in-person. Is that correct?
That is correct. Sandra, have you been following everything? Is there any way we can read what will be in the record?
Chair Ford, may I?
Yes.
Because 3 paragraphs have slightly different wording, but it has the same intent of state metrics being at the 350 prior to the amendments. That's why I was careful using my words that the spirit of we need it to be exact. If you give me a moment, I guess I could type, copy and paste and do it really quickly.
Yeah, that'd be appreciated. I think it's important that we state what we're actually talking about and what we're about to vote on. Like I said, I'll try to explain it as much as possible, but what will go on the record is the original motion by Director Bauer, which was about Lippy. The second amendment, which was voted and carried, was the addition of the 2 paragraphs to that Lippy motion. And that was then led us to the third amendment, which was motioned and carried about the metrics being changed within those first 3 paragraphs. And that's where we are now. I will tell you now that this is probably the part of Robert's rules that I hate the most because we're all confused. But hopefully, once we read it, we then can all be on the same page, discuss what we're voting on, and then vote. And for all of you listeners out there who are waiting for us to finish this, welcome to process.
Chair Ford, I'll need about 30 seconds more. So I'm on my last paragraph.
Not a problem. We want to get it right. This is a very serious and very important discussion and motion. So we do not want to get this wrong. And I don't want anyone to vote on something that they are unclear about. Voting is a privilege that we have. We do not want to take advantage of it in any way or not recognize the power of it. So let's all be very clear. It's time to breathe.
Maybe for you, I'm trying to.
You're under pressure.
Typing quicker. Okay, so I've taken the 3 paragraphs and I'm Chair Ford, with your permission, I will read the motion that has been amended twice for all board members to hear the intent of everything. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Okay, here I go. Remember, I'm the dyslexic board member. The motion has been amended twice to be implement a grade K1 elementary hybrid delivery model when employees working with grade K1 elementary school students have had the opportunity for both COVID-19 vaccine doses and after Clackamas County health metrics for returning to in-person instruction shall be below 200 cases per 100,000 for 2 consecutive weeks. Second paragraph, expand the elementary hybrid model to grades 2-3 when employees working with grade 2-3 elementary school students have had the opportunity for both COVID-19 vaccine doses and with Clackamas County still meeting the health metrics below 200 cases per 100,000 for returning to in-person instruction and approximately 2 weeks after implementing the K1 elementary hybrid delivery model. Grades 4 through 12 will remain in comprehensive distance learning. Last paragraph, begin the implementation of limited in-person instruction to all grades as long as the state health metrics for returning to in-person instruction continue to be below 200 per 100,000 for 2 consecutive weeks.
Okay, thank you. That is the motion that is on the floor. It has also been amended twice to get to that and carried twice. Do we need any other clarity or discussion at this point about that? Thank you, Director Schradel.
Out of kindness to our board secretary, I want to confirm that Sandra did get that.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
And I can email it to her.
Chair Ford, I did. I have recorded it as per Stephen has stated.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. Director McVeigh.
So based on the amended motion, limited instruction, which could include clubs and affinity groups, all those, no, it would be below 200 before that, and then also K1 hybrid below 200. Is that correct?
That is how the motion is stated, yes.
Okay. And when we surveyed families that overwhelmingly wanted hybrid model, did we tell them that we would be using state guidelines to guide us in our decision making?
I just want clarity in your question. We surveyed elementary.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Did we tell them that we'd be using OHA or state guidelines in our decision-making process?
Director Ford, do you want me to take that question?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
So when we surveyed our parents at the end of November and the first part of December, the metrics were still mandatory. So I think it would have been assumed that we would have had to follow those at the time of the survey. January 1st, those metrics became advisory.
Director Bauer.
But also those metrics were lower when you surveyed parents, correct?
They were.
Yeah. That's why I don't have a problem with that number changing.
And did we is there any data that 200 is that much safer than 350, or is this just a number that Stevens pulled out?
So that's the categories that we have, those color metrics. And so based on that, they are what they're assuming in terms of, or what they're projecting, what science is telling them, the levels of spread are less or more according to those categories.
Got it.
I just have a clarifying question. So does this also assume that when we do transition into this model, that folks will already be vaccinated?
Yes, the vaccination is attached to this decision. Yes.
Okay. And it's not just teachers, but it's other school staff as well. So bus drivers, meal providers. Okay, excellent.
Other discussion, clarity, Director Strado?
I just wish to say thank you to the board for allowing me to do those amendments. I spent time with on phone calls with the state epidemiologists. I've spent a lot of time on this, and asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic people, students, staff, anybody, they do not live at school. They do go home. And so I appreciate everybody hearing what I had to say.
Thank you, Director Strado. Director Benaloga, did you have your hand up?
I did. I have a quick question as far as, just for clarification, for where it says begin the implementation of limited in person. And so we're going to wait for limited in person and to transition to the hybrid until we are below 200. And what other activities are affected by that? Because someone had mentioned that it was also the clubs and the affinity groups. So for them to meet, does that include even groups that are asking to meet outdoors, or what will that mean for those groups?
Superintendent, do you want to take that one?
I think it's going to depend on how we want to define limited in-person instruction. The way that we have defined it thus far is that limited in-person instruction are these cohorts of 20 students. And I am questioning whether the motion as it's currently stated would prohibit us from bringing clubs in outside and after school, or things like the drum line, if they were outside and after school. They are not OSAA sponsored sports. And so I think as a superintendent, I need clarity on the limited in-person portion that is now less than 200. Is that for indoor activities and outdoor activities, or is it just for indoor activities?
Director Schradel.
You know, the motion that we have before us and seconded is a living document.
Mm-hmm.
We have future board meetings. The board leadership can meet and work with superintendent to better define it so that I can understand it better, to better represent our community and keep them protected. And so I am open to improvements always. Mm-hmm. But when we have this slate of things to do and we clump them together, I do believe this is the best decision, and next board meeting we can improve things.
Mm-hmm. So I will say that there is room to place what Director Schradel said into the motion. It would require a third amendment, but that is an option if people feel comfortable with that. Director Bauer.
So Chair Ford, are you saying that we would define the limited in person here with another amendment, or what were you suggesting?
I'm not making a suggestion. I'm stating a fact of how to take what has been stated. If you're comfortable with what was stated, you can put it in writing by amending the fact that you want to have more clarity, or with clarity in the future, or whatever you want to say. You can put that as an amendment in the motion. It is not our job to define what LIPI is. That is the job of the superintendent and his staff. But we can put in there with the understanding that district leadership will define LIPI and any other suggestions around it. So at this time, the motion is as stands. Are we ready to vote, or do we need more discussion?
I just have clarifying question on just what was just said. So, you know, this is a dynamic that just keeps changing, right? Every single week, we're getting new information, quite frankly, from health, from public health, from vaccines, from the governor's office, from OHA, from ODE. And so this is a situation that none of us, quite frankly, have never been in, where literally every week we are getting new information. So I think for parents and for community and for students, I definitely feel like I owe it to them to give folks a sense of what our baseline is and establish some sort of consistency in our teaching, and again in our approach towards vaccines and all of that. And so for me, I would feel comfortable moving forward with this decision because I know how much things are changing rapidly and plans are getting revised, and this is a living document, as Director Schradel said. But I also want to be, again, open to those possibilities of reimagining what the 21st century classroom is going to look like, right? In this pandemic and after this pandemic, with all people being included, with all communities and parents being at the center of this decision, as well as our teachers. So all that to say that I think for me, I know that maybe tomorrow I wake up and there's going to be another outbreak. That could happen. We are just living in very uncertain times right now. But I think the decision that we are making today, for me, with all the facts, with all the evidence that's been presented. Again, science, OHA, given what we do know about the situation, and also trying to balance everything that is happening with the needs of our students, as well as other learners, different types of learners from all abilities, from all backgrounds. I do feel like tonight I'm able to move forward with this decision, while again underscoring the flexibility and the innovation and the creativity that we need to continue to have moving forward. So thank you for
that. Anything else? Director Perez?
One more question for clarification. Did we answer, I guess, did we address what superintendent presented there about the indoor and outdoor?
No, we did not.
Okay.
As it stands, the statistic in the motion does not address indoor-outdoor clarity. So no.
I think if the board would like, if the board chooses to pass the amended motion, staff and I will go off and define, do outdoor clubs qualify as limited in-person instruction, and I can notify the board of that definition.
Right. So, but just for clarity of what superintendent just said, we would have to amend the motion to do that. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? Like, as it stands, it's saying that they can't, clubs and everything in this definition are in there. And I'm hearing a concern that it's not clear. Director Schradel.
You know, for the purpose of the conversation and discussion, I mean, at our next board meeting, we could hear a motion that addresses from what the results of Superintendent Utterback's research is. When is our next board meeting?
February 4th.
So it's not a tremendous amount of time away from us evolving this living document to allow the outdoor activities, but it is highly complex to continue to do modifications to motions.
Okay.
We are three layers deep.
Sandra, is there a correction to that date? What is the date?
February 11th is our next regular meeting. The 4th is a special meeting.
Excellent. So February 11th would be the next time we would have that opportunity that Director Schradel was just bringing up. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, Director Bauer.
Just one question. Is this affecting any clubs now that would have to shut down?
We are only operating under your previous motion, which was OSAA sponsored sports and the conditioning and training associated with that.
Thank you.
So to add to Director Bauer's question, if the numbers were not changed, was there any group that would be able to do things now?
Sir, can you restate that for me?
We kept the 350. If the metric wasn't changed specifically for groups, was there any groups that could meet immediately?
Under the motion under the original motion.
On the original recommendation that you.
The original recommendation, the way in which it was written, we believed we had the board's authority to begin bringing back additional clubs.
Got it.
And school activities.
So the twice amended motion would then stop that ability.
Yes, potentially. We're in the process and we're not going to figure it out tonight. I think the question is, are after school activities like clubs, drum lines, those sorts of things, are they under the state's definition of LIPI? If they are, then this motion would say we can't start them until we're under 200 for 2 consecutive weeks.
Okay.
If they're not, I will come back, I will let the board know that. And if they're not, then I believe under this motion, the district has the authority to start those activities.
Got it. But if they are,
we would not start it until we're under 200, until we meet the criteria here that the amended motion.
so I'm going to go back to my suggestion, which is to provide clarity on this motion with an amendment so that it doesn't hinder anything that is being prepared to happen. Am I being clear? Okay.
I think I can.
We're about to shut down something, y'all.
I think I can do this. Chair Ford, if you allow me.
Excellent. Please do.
Because I did the motion, I would only need the approval of the second to agree with the statement, and I'm open to friendly wording by any superintendent and or board members. The twice modified motion that I read into the record would include a fourth paragraph that would allow for the remaining 2 paragraphs to be implemented. Now the question is, would that meet to allow the use of outdoor fields?
So are you?
I'm sorry to ask it as a question. So I'll have to do a clarifying question prior to making a modifying.
Got it.
Superintendent Etterback, if a amendment were to pass that would say excluding
outdoor clubs,
or basically excluding allowing district high school to participate in Oregon school activity, the last 2 paragraphs, is it?
I just wonder if it would be easier for you to do a friendly amendment to that 3rd paragraph with the phrase, this does not include outdoor activities.
Okay. Chair Ford, do I need to read the entire motion or just amend what?
Because it's yours, just do amend what you want. The sentence.
I wish to amend the motion that I read into the record so the 3rd paragraph ends with this does not include outdoor activities and club sports.
Does the same person need to second it, or can anyone?
The person who seconded my motion.
First time.
Oh, that was me. I think that was me. Second.
Okay.
So because of that, it will carry.
Correct.
We don't have to vote on that 3rd amendment. That carries. Is everyone clear on that? So now we have a motion that has the 3 paragraphs that have been amended 3 times. The first time was to add the 2 additional things. The second time was to add the metrics. And now the 3rd time is to exclude outdoor clubs. Are we all clear? Okay. Any more clarity or discussion needed?
On the whole thing? On the whole thing?
Now we're talking about the whole thing.
Yeah.
The whole shebang.
I have a question. So changing the metrics, ignoring the OHA recommended guidelines, would that change, would it put our teachers behind in getting vaccinations, where they would say, oh, this school district needs to open because they meet the metrics, North Clackamas, you're behind, we're going to have you wait?
No, I don't believe our vaccine distribution is going to be impacted by this motion.
There are other things that will impact vaccination, but Any other clarity or discussion needed? Are we ready to vote? First, let me say this. You guys did a great job. That's tough stuff to go through that and listen and pay attention. So if I had a star board, I'd put a star up for each one of you. All right, let's do this. Director Schrader, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Benaloga, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Perez, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Way, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director McVeigh, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Bauer, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. It's unanimous that we will have those things that we just talked about happen for reopening. Have we hit all of your recommendations? Because I can't say that I've actually kept track. Have we hit all of your recommendations?
Yes, all recommendations have been acted upon and amended as amended. And I think we're ready to move into executive session.
Excellent. Thank you all for listening. This has been a long, tedious process. We are trying to move a mountain here. And yes, it is one grain at a time, but we're paying attention to every grain because we believe in equity. Thank you, guys. We're moving into executive session at 7:22. You guys take a break. We'll meet back at 7:30 to start executive session. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, board.